David Lang here from Israeli Cool with a very special guest tonight. He's a very well-known Hollywood actor whose credits and resume would have Kevin Bacon even going, wow, this guy is prolific. His credits include Lost, Supernatural, Quantico, 13 Reasons Why, and The Big Lebowski. Mark Pellegrino, how the devil are you?
I'm doing good, David. Thanks for having me. Hey, I just wanted to say, they say everybody is 6 degrees of separation away from Kevin Bacon. I'm 0 degrees of separation because I worked with his wife, Kira Sedgwick, on The Closer and met him on the Wrap Party.
I can't say I'm surprised by that. I mean, there was no way you guys wouldn't intersect. First of all, I have to ask you, how are you doing during this lockdown?
I'm going semi-crazy. It's really good practice at self-starting. I'm used to having a schedule sort of worked out for a year, so I have a structure, and I just sort of blindly follow the structure until the end of the year. Now I have to make up my own shit, so it's tough, but I seem to be getting through it okay. What about you?
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm doing okay. Thanks. So one of your claims to fame actually is at conventions, supernatural conventions, that you do on-stage karaoke. So I do have to ask you, have you been tempted to do any online karaoke during this lockdown?
Absolutely not. Why? Because I care about my fans. I don't want to subject them to that. And when I did karaoke, the first time I was plied into doing with 5 bourbons. So I don't think I can get up there without lots of alcohol in me. And I gave up drinking 2 years ago, so I guess that means karaoke's out.
Oh wow! Well done, giving up drinking. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, based on your logic, I could definitely do online karaoke, but my poison is single malt whiskey, not what you just mentioned.
That's my poison too. My poison is anything with alcohol.
Yeah. What about Netflix? What is Mark Pellegrino watching these days in lockdown?
Oh, wow. There's a great Korean zombie apocalypse series on Netflix called The Kingdom. So I just finished that. I thought it was apropos. What else on Netflix? God, it's hard to distinguish now in my mind what's Amazon Prime, what's Netflix, what's Hulu,
It can be anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've been watching a lot of Amazon Prime. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is great. Fleabag is great. I try to see 2 or 3 movies a week because I'm working my way through the 1001 movies you have to see before you die. And unlike the AFI top 100 movies, I'm starting at the very end of the list. So I started at 2016 when that list was compiled. And now I'm into the 80s. So I've gone through 30 years of filmmaking so far. And some of them I just don't understand why they're in the top, the 1001 movies you have to see before you die. Because some of them are just not very good.
Do you ever watch any of your own shows, or are you one of these actors that avoids your own work like the plague?
I used to avoid my work, and then I discovered that it's actually helpful for me to watch what I do. Because sometimes you can feel that a scene is coming off very well, but when you see it played back, nothing that you intended is actually reading. And so you have to make adjustments. And you know who I learned that from? I learned that from Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges would do a scene, and then he'd go behind the camera and request playback, watch the scene like this, study it, and then go back and make adjustments. And I thought that was such a tremendous talent for him to be, on the one hand, totally intuitive and spontaneous, and at the other hand, have such craft that he could pay attention to his errors and actually correct them without appearing to be too self-conscious or self-conscious at all. So I stole that from him, and I do playback all the time, and I watch my work whenever I can, preferably alone. I don't like watching it in front of people. And I learn from my mistakes, basically.
I'm glad you mentioned Jeff Bridges, because that's a great segue to my next question. You were the Big Lebowski, as I mentioned in the beginning, and you played a thug that actually put the dude who was Jeff Bridges, the character that Jeff Bridges played, his head down the toilet. Quite an iconic character, even though the screen time wasn't huge. Although you weren't the guy that peed on the dude's rug, but that's another issue. In any event, I'm just curious because The Big Lebowski is my favorite movie of all time, definitely my favorite comedy. What was it like to work on that movie? And did you have any idea it was going to become such a cult classic?
First of all, I had more lines than Wu, the rug pisser. And I personally think the things I did were more iconic than pissing on the rug. Had quite a bit of fun working on that show, but not fun in the sense of, you know, it's a barrel of laughs and we're all joking around and going to a party. Fun in the sense of being stimulated by creative minds and watching really, really good filmmakers do their work. I was able to see a project transformed from the script, which is basically an outline of what's going on, to the final product of it in moving pictures. And the transformation was unbelievable. And of course, because they're master craftsmen. And I loved the way they worked. They divided their duties. So Joel Cohen would do most of the camera directing and work in the technical aspects of the film. Excuse me. And Ian would talk to the actors. And it was in that project, when was that? 96, 90, somewhere in the mid to late 90s. Yeah. It was then, and I'd already been in the business about 10 years, that I discovered that a line reading could actually be a very valuable tool for an actor. Most actors hate line readings. They don't want to be told how to say something. It gets them in their head and makes them self-conscious. And self-consciousness is the enemy of good acting. But a line reading could also transmit tons of information. And Ethan would say the line as he heard it. And contained in that musicality was a lot of action for me to actually think about. So from that time on, I never got defensive with a line reading from a director. It was my impression became, oh, you just don't know how to direct, to, oh, actually you're giving me a shorthand direction to get exactly to the result that you need. I learned a lot on that shoot.
You also worked on Lethal Weapon 3 with Mel Gibson, not my favorite person in the world. And this was pre his anti-Semitic breakdown.
Yeah.
Did you have any inkling at the time that he might have been a kangaroo short of a full paddock?
No, because he came off of it as a very articulate, intelligent guy who had his shit together. And my experience on that show was they had a great time filming. Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, especially Mel Gibson, were kings of campy practical jokes, and they love to play practical jokes on each other. And Dick Donner, the great director Dick Donner, who did The Omen and so many other films, was directing the film. He loved practical jokes and made the atmosphere very fun and light to work in. And Mel and I had an hour or 2 hour conversation about Shakespeare, because I expressed interest in it. And he said, hey, let's talk about it. You want a cappuccino? I said, sure. I thought we were going to the catering truck to get a cappuccino, and here he takes me into his trailer, makes the cappuccino himself. We sit down and we just start talking about Shakespeare. I found his analysis of Hamlet to be one of the most intelligent analyses I've ever heard. And I also got to see how a real actor deals with a very reputable director who is making acting very difficult, because Franco Zeffirelli used camera angles and the lens in such a way as to make acting very, very hard unless you were very technically skilled, and somehow Mel was able to overcome that. I don't know that I would have been able to overcome those obstacles. Like, for instance, one obstacle was he did the to be or not to be speech in 3 separate occasions, in 3 sections, in 3 different locations. And there was a depth of field of focus where he couldn't really move too much backwards or forwards or to the side without going out of focus. Well, I find that lack of continuity and technical obstacles a little too hard to overcome. I don't know how he made that speech carry, but he really did. So I'm still a fan, despite the fact that he's a nut.
Fair enough. So it sounds like you've had some very good experiences on set with those first two
Yeah.
examples. Now I want to get to the nitty gritty. Have you ever had experiences on set that were not pleasant? And you don't have to name names if you don't want to.
Yes, I have. I did have an experience on a set with a very good actor. Let's say this. He was a very good actor. Then he got a television show for a number of years, and he became a mannered actor. But he had power on the television show because he was sort of a co-producer of it. So he actually felt free to direct the actors, even though there was a director there. It's a very annoying thing to be directed by another actor, even a famous actor. You don't want them looking at your work and critiquing you. You want them being in the moment with you. And we did a scene together where he was questioning me, and he kept cutting out lines of the scene because he had to stand there and just watch me. And when the camera was on him, he was clearly self-conscious about doing nothing. But when the camera wasn't on him, he was like this, watching me and directing me. And I took it all like a mensch, because I'm a team player, but it was annoying. And I thought to myself, this is what you should have been doing during the scene when the camera was on you. You should have been directing me. That would have been your action, and you would have been very interesting instead of posing and taking off your sunglasses at the right time and all the other schlocky, sticky crap you learned how to do. But I survived that, and I had another experience on a television show where the actors were great. I had a great time with the actors, but the production side of it were not honest, and they tried to rip me off on a number of occasions, and they made working very unpleasant. So I asked them to kill me, and they did.
So I know you've been lost a innumerable number of times. You've probably lost count. But I have to ask, because I was very personally invested in that show. It's one of the most divisive shows of the last few decades. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Mark. And the reason for this is because of the finale. There are fans that absolutely love the finale to that show. The show was about 6 or 7 seasons long. But then there are others like me who actually lament the lingering unsolved mysteries on the island. Do you have an opinion on this? Where do you stand on this controversy?
I haven't seen enough of the show to really have a valid opinion on the controversy. But sometimes lingering mysteries are great because they keep you thinking about the show and connected to it for years after the show is over. So in that respect, maybe it's okay to leave some loose ends if they provoke thought. As far as the end goes, it's one of the only episodes I did see. And since I didn't have a dog in that fight, I thought it was fantastic. I mean, how can you not love a death scene where you lie down and the dog lies down next to you and you both pass into the next dimension together? I don't know. But to me, I cried.
I probably should have said spoiler alerts, but I guess if you haven't watched the finale, which was about a decade ago, then it's not relevant.
Spoilers. There's thousands of mysteries that you still have to solve. There's no spoilers here.
But speaking about controversies, you came out of the closet recently as someone who adores pineapple pizza. And that really resonated with me because, as you know, I'm Australian, and pineapple pizza is a very Australian thing, much like Vegemite. But how did you come to love pineapple pizza, Mark?
Why don't they call pineapple pizza Australian pizza then? Why do they call it Hawaiian pizza?
I'm not saying we invented it, but in my experience, most of my friends loved it.
I guess because there's big pineapple plantations on Oahu, so a pineapple you just automatically think is Hawaiian. Yeah, why is that controversial? I don't understand it. Pizza's a perfect food, and anything you put on it, except Vegemite, is going to become perfect because of its association with pizza. So there's no controversy here.
Okay, so you don't think there's a controversy there, but let's get into perhaps the most controversial topic on the planet, at least up in the top 5, the Middle East conflict. Let's dip our toes into that now. Because basically, yes, you are one of the most outspoken people on the Middle East conflict, on the Israeli-Palestinian Arab conflict. And you're in Hollywood, obviously, and views in Hollywood normally range from even-handed to unabashedly anti-Israel, which is particularly disappointing considering how many Jewish people work in Hollywood, and many of them are the ones who have the most extreme anti-Israel views. What makes your views even more impressive to me, Mark, is the fact that you're an atheist, and also you do not see indigenousness as a determining factor of the legitimacy of a state. So how did you come to become so pro-Israel?
I've been pro-Israel for a long time because it's the only free state surrounded by 22 tyrannies. But I had to come out of the closet because I forget the exact date. Was it 2013 or 2014 when the petition was circulating around Hollywood?
14.
Yeah, 2014. Hollywood A-listers decided to stand up for the wrong side, and not only vocally, but in more ways than one, bash Israel for its response to Palestinian terrorism. And I thought the good guys weren't getting a fair shake in the press, and they weren't getting a fair shake from artists who should respect a free country over a tyranny, and they deserved to be defended. And so I stepped up and did the best I could to stand in for my Israeli brothers and sisters who deserved more than what they got from the media.
Yeah, it was noticed and most appreciated. You've even gone so far as to say, and I find this quite remarkable, that every other state in the Middle East besides Israel is illegitimate and doesn't deserve to exist as it's presently constituted. Like, that's wow.
Yes, I'm weird that way. I take Enlightenment principles seriously. And I think that the concept of individual rights is one of the greatest gifts the Enlightenment gave us. It's not popular nowadays to say that. It's popular now to base civilization on indigenous culture and to claim that that in and of itself is worthy of recognition. But it's not. A state is a geographical area that encompasses a certain culture, but it constitutes a state to the degree that it legitimately recognizes certain fundamental principles of human action. And the only state that embraces Enlightenment principles in the Middle East is Israel. And so I'm morally obligated to defend the free country, or the one whose founding principles in their Declaration of Independence recognize the individual as the primary element of society. And I'm obligated to fight the collectivists who use violence as a means of getting what they want. I just don't, I see it as a no-brainer. Unfortunately, it's not as easy an issue as I would hope. So many people embrace the exact wrong notions of what makes a thing legitimate, what makes a state legitimate, what makes an action moral, you know?
So one of my favorite quotes from you was after you first visited Israel about 3 years ago. And it is, I think that where you stand on this issue of Israel's existence tells the world a lot about your moral compass.
Yes, indeed. I mean, to me, politics is downstream from ethics. Whatever the popular ethics of a culture is going to be, are going to be expressed in their politics. And if your ethics are collectivistic, primarily, your politics are going to be collectivistic. And what does that mean? The individual is sacrificable to some authority. If you're individualist ethics, if you hold an individualist ethics, then your politics is going to be individualistic. And what does that mean? The individual is the primary unit of society, and the right of the individual to determine his own moral fate, to pursue values, to own and keep property, to live and be happy, are the object of protection of the state. So yeah, embracing a freedom-loving society says that you think people are free and autonomous and ought to be free and autonomous. And embracing a totalitarian society or an authoritarian society says you think people are determined, they need to be whipped and saddled and ridden by some authority to do the right thing. And I despise that way of looking at things.
As I mentioned, you were here about 3 years ago. Was there anything about your time here in Israel that you found surprising?
I mean, I have to confess, I was a little nervous going over there because you don't hear about the benevolence of the state. You hear about a state in perpetual warfare with everybody around it. So you sort of expect to see or feel that vibe wherever you go, but you don't. I mean, we landed in Tel Aviv, and it was a beautiful city on the beach, and there wasn't a hint of anything scary. It was just a normal city on the beach where people probably vacation and have a great time and enjoy themselves. And I felt that all through, going all the way up to Haifa and all the way back down to Jerusalem. There was never a time at which I felt a threat. It always seemed peaceful and harmonious. And I was exposed to lots of different cultures within Israel, some of which should be in conflict, but they weren't, because they all accepted the premise of toleration and individual rights, and so they all got along with each other. So I was happy to see that it was so peaceful, so cosmopolitan, and also that I get what I can't get anywhere in the United States or even Europe. I get to see things that have a history that goes back thousands and thousands of years. I get to touch the source of Western civilization when I'm there. So it was great to see modernity and ancient times merging into a nice compatible whole there.
You've described yourself, Mark, both as a classical liberal and a radical capitalist. So to the uninitiated, that might sound like a contradiction. Can you explain how to reconcile the two?
I think only because capitalism is associated with conservatism in the right wing, and people think liberalism is associated with left-wing politics, and their values seem to be sort of disconnected with each other. In reality, the left and the right aren't so far apart. They essentially agree with each other that the individual is not the primary element of society. Some collective is, and it's the responsibility of the individual to sacrifice into that collective. The left thinks it's the proletariat, the right thinks it's the nation state, the race, the family. But liberalism and capitalism are liberalism is the political effect of capitalism, and capitalism is the economic effect of liberalism. Both those ideas believe that the human being needs to be free in order to live and thrive, and that his individual life is an end unto itself. It's not a means to the ends of some collective or authority. And so therein lies the difference between classical liberalism and leftism, is the individualism, and therein lies the difference between capitalism and modern conservatism.
You're clearly a man of principle, Mark, who's not afraid to voice his opinion. And that opinion, I'm sure most people will know this, is probably not going to be that popular in Hollywood circles. Has this affected your relationships on set at all with other actors, with cast members, production people, or even affected your job prospects before?
The jury's out about job prospects, because if you get turned down for something, they could just say they didn't like, the way you did the reading, or they don't think you're right for the character. And any prejudice on their part with respect to my prominent political voice would not be made. I wouldn't be made aware of it. On the street, like in Hollywood, with actors that I've been working with, I've had very stimulating conversations with people on every side of the aisle, and I tend to make converts. There's not a whole lot of conservatives in Washington, but there's a number of libertarians and sort of free radicals out there who are waiting for an ideology to grab onto and don't find their wants and thoughts satisfied with the conventional right and left. And when they hear me say something that neither side is saying, they actually gravitate to it. So I've made some pretty good friends. And the people on the left who I have discussions with are too befuddled by the things I say to know whether or not they hate me or love me. So the consequences of my political ideology remain to be seen. Although over the last 2 months I've lost something like 5,000 followers. I'm assuming some of that has to do with my constant drumbeat of liberty in the face of these lockdowns. My constant, holding up the mirror to the face of a community that is all too willing to be compliant to a really irrational government reaction to a very serious issue. But in their attempt to save themselves, the political class is literally destroying our economy. And I don't think that's a very popular message nowadays. I don't think liberty is popular now, unfortunately. So I'm noticing it in a drop-off of followers. Now that could be Twitter purging me. It could be people not liking what I have to say. It could be people passing lies around about me on the internet that people just decide to believe. I don't know.
Right. And on the flip side, have you actually ever turned down roles because of your principles?
I have, actually, with a amazing writer. One of the best writers in Hollywood was doing a political show. I was supposed to audition for one of the main characters in it. I told my management, I can't audition for this. It's too real. And what I meant by that, because I've played characters who are real. They're real assholes, and they do really bad things. So it seems
you've been the devil.
I've been the devil, for crying out loud. So it seems like turning down a part of a politician or pundit would be stupid, especially when it's written by a guy who's won every award in the book. But to be an actor and to espouse certain political principles is to stand up for them in the realm of art. It's to endorse them. It's to spread them. It's to say this is good, right? When the artist paints a picture or the artist writes a script, the stuff in there is the universe as he sees it, and he's saying this is the way I see things. And I didn't want to participate in a world that promoted ideas that are not the way I see things. Quite the opposite. And in fact, I think those ideas are perilous. Now, had I been the opposition voice, that would have been interesting.
Right. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago how you're prominent on Twitter. That's actually how I came to know you and become friends with you. But you've been subjected to some vitriol, like terrible vitriol. I mean, I guess vitriol is always terrible, but I mean from even teenagers, which is very upsetting, even more upsetting than most. How are you able to stay on Twitter? Because many people, many celebrities have just said, you know what? I've got to focus my energies on my work. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this may be a character flaw, but I can't resist slapping bullies. I don't care if they're teenagers or adults. And that is a character flaw because it gets me into scraps with people. And then they use tidbits of those scraps to pretend like they're the victims. And then that becomes a narrative all its own and takes on a life of its own. I'm trying to wean myself out of the habit of slapping bullies, but it's hard. And teenagers are a particularly disturbing group of bullies because they're just repeating what they've learned from their culture and their teachers, but they're repeating them as if they're original ideas, and they all sort of reinforce each other in gang pile-ons. So if you say something in response to something they say, 70,000 of them pop on you all at once. And they're not really listening to what you're trying to tell them. they're actually bullying you so they get more followers. So I've developed a reputation for being cantankerous on Twitter, and that apparently gives them a little bit of street cred if they stand up to me. I've even had one of them lie and tweet that she was at a convention with me and was confronting me through the entire convention. And she had her followers believing that she was confronting me. This very same person pretended that one of my followers sent her a death threat. So it's like you get these kids who have no context, who think their context is everything, who are willing to do anything to get more recognition, including throw the truth out the table, tank your reputation, anything to get them 300 more followers. So yeah, Twitter, for me, Twitter started out as a great place to exchange controversial ideas and to have great debates with people. And it's turned into this toxic camp where, you know, you got the left-wing collectivists on one side, the right-wing collectivists on another, the postmodernist eggheads who don't believe in anything in another corner, and then you got anarchists and minarchists and value subjectivists, you know, attacking you from another end. And if you don't represent any of those camps, you're alone. You're a man crying in the wilderness.
No, absolutely. It's a cesspool. One thing I would mention, though, is I find that you've always been intellectually honest. And even when people oppose your views, you give them a chance to talk and engage in a debate. Unfortunately, especially in the cases that you've just described, people take advantage of that and then try to paint you as some sort of villain. But I think you're known, at least to other intellectually honest people, as an intellectually honest person. So I have to thank you for that.
Thank you. I try to be.
I do want to also touch on the American Capitalist Party, which is a political party that you established. Yes, do you plan on being US president anytime soon, given that we already have a celebrity president?
No, I think politics is a cesspool, and I think we've fallen so far away from our founding principles that what represents our principles today is a pale reflection of what it should be. And I think when you create a system that is primarily authoritarian with a slight recognition of individual rights to keep things going, you're going to attract authoritarian types, people who lust for power over others, to the job. And I don't want to subject myself to that. I don't want to subject myself to a political carnival where people are going to dissect my life and dirty laundry because they have political ambitions. I don't want my life to be more ruined by these political carnivores. So no, I don't think I would ever enter into the political field. There's a guy now who's sending out his feelers to the Libertarian Party, Justin Amash. He's one of the few principled thinkers in Washington right now. And I mean, by few, you could probably count the number of principled politicians on one hand. And I think the time is right for a third party to come into the fore. And I wish it would be the Capitalist Party, but at the moment, the Capitalist Party is only a set of principles. I think they're better than what the libertarians have to offer, because the libertarian political ideology is not really a philosophy. It's not really grounded in ethics. It's not really grounded in reason. And so its concept of rights is twisted and a little distorted. Its concept of liberty is a little distorted to me. But it's pure enough that I think it offers a great alternative to the two buffoons that are going to be running against each other in 2020. So no, I don't have political ambitions. Yes, I hope the Capitalist Party becomes viable, but I'm not sure when. There's lots of political obstacles to that. And at the moment, there's the opportunity for the libertarians to actually send somebody with a brain into the fray, and at least that person can offer arguments that will give the American people alternatives they might not have thought about when they go in there to the ballot box.
Mark, you're a great actor, but I think anyone watching this will see you're highly intelligent as well. The two do not have to be mutually exclusive. Did you think of doing anything else had you not been an actor?
Yeah, I think I would be a teacher. I already teach acting, and I get a lot of joy out of that. And if it weren't acting that I was teaching, it would probably be something like history or political science. But hey, man, there's no more gratifying feeling than sculpting another human being, providing them with knowledge and the tools to think, and watching them run with it and create themselves and become something great. It's a really great feeling. And that may be my destiny eventually. I think I'm a pretty decent teacher. We'll see how it goes in Hollywood. We'll see how it goes after the pandemic. I mean, everybody's pensions and retirements are being sucked away as we speak, and who knows how well we'll be able to recover from this crazy lockdown. True
story. Well, Mark, I think we'll have to leave it there. I think I could talk to you for hours and hours. I think we'll have to talk again, and I want to thank you. And
thank you.
Please God, may we maybe next time do an interview here in Israel. I hope you're here soon.
Me too. It's great seeing you again, Dave.